Hi everyone, my name is Abdullah Usman Mijimo, and I'll be presenting to you a case of Omar Khadr based on ethical analysis. And this case was compiled by myself and my colleague 16 Palisari Johnson. So here is the overview of the case. Omar Khadr is a Toronto-born Canadian caught by American Army officers after a fight in Afghanistan in 2002. He was at the age of 15 when he was caught. Omar Khadr is a minor at that age, and he was the only person to be convicted and sentenced at that age in Guantanamo Bay for approximately 13 years. However, in 2010, the Supreme Court of Canada decided that Khadr's confinement was illegal based on the principle of fundamental justice and the most essential Canadian benchmarks about the treatment of youth suspects. Despite rehashed endeavors by the Canadian government to keep him in jail, Khadr was released on bail in May 2015. However, in July 2017, he got a compensation of $10.5 million based on judgment of the Supreme Court that his rights were trampled upon. Fast forward, after Omar Khadr was called by US Army, Omar ought to have been distinguished as a child soldier because he was 15 years, and this is a protocol of UN, the protocol to convention on the rights of child on the involvement of armed conflict. Rather, Omar was wrongly caught, confined, and harassed in Bagram jail until 2002, even though he was a child soldier at that age and was to be treated as such. He was then exchanged to Guantanamo Bay and held there for over 10 more years, frequently in isolation, torture, waterboarding, until since quite long ago he was repatriated back to Canada in 2012. And even when he was repatriated to Canada, he was under strict and extreme security jail. So here's the Canadian government's complicity in the case. So both US military and the Canadian government had a commitment to request that he was to be dealt with as per the Geneva Convention with unique respect for his age and be promptly repatriated back to Canada. But that was not done. Rather, the government, first the Liberal government and after that the Conservative, were complicit in the illegal treatment of Omar Khadr, even though they recognized that he was 15 at that age and he was a minor. Despite the fact that he was a Canadian kid, he was denied his human rights, protection, his basic rights, and all other rights associated with the Canadian based on Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. Based on this, I would suggest that this was unethical, illegal on the part of the Canadian government. The Supreme Court of Canada and the US incomparable courts have affirmed that the US and Canada have violated Omar Khadr's rights. So both have admitted that they violated his rights, which is very much unethical. However, the UN Committee Against Torture has approached Canada to respect its legitimate commitment to guarantee that Omar gets review for his human rights infringement that the Canadian Supreme Court ruled upon. So here's how the public viewed the case. So initially, the Canadian government first opposed Khadr's exchange to Guantanamo Bay. So this is where the Canadian government fell short of its ethical reasoning. Instead of the Canadian government to receive Omar Khadr from US, or that is to say from the Guantanamo Bay prisons, they did not, even though they recognized that he was a minor and he was a Canadian citizen. However, some accuse that Khadr impacted a child that settled on Ottawa after Prime Minister John Christian in the 90s interceded in Pakistan in 1990 to have Ahmed liberated from jail. Based on recent study, that is 2009, An Angus Reid survey discovered that 52 of respondents were unsympathetic to Khadr. So you could see that most Canadians were even unsympathetic with him because they even did not know the full import of the case. They did not recognize that he was a minor, and then a minor was not supposed to be treated in that way. Fast forward 2015 with the same survey, Angus Reid survey, 67 respondents said Khadr ought to have been dealt with as a youngster officers. So fast forward in 2015, people now became oblivious of the case. They now became aware of the case. They now recognized that the child had been his rights had been violated. But when you look at the 2009 survey, 52% were unsympathetic. However, in 2015, 6 years later, 67% recognized that he should have been dealt with as a child soldier. These were the illegitimate charges. All right. In 2006, the US accused Omar of 5 ex post facto offenses. Then, not just have the allegations against him never been demonstrated or heard by frequently constituted court, the charges were not offenses in 2002 under US law. So even the US recognized that those charges were not offenses. Even though they recognized that they still tortured him in Guantanamo Bay and refused to guarantee him his human rights. These laws are still not offenses under Canadian or international law. As maintained in the current Hamdan claim, the military court in Guantanamo or any real court is not allowed to apply the law retroactively. So these laws should not have been applied to Omar Khadr retroactively, even though he was a minor. They both turned deaf ears to this. Under Common Article 3 Geneva Convention, it's an offense for false sentence without routinely commissioned yet Canadian date. In 2008, the Federal Court of Canada uncovered that the US had given Canada case proof and asked for Khadr to be tried in Canada, but Canada refused. So here is Canada's obligation to Omar Khadr. Omar endured years of suffering based upon his denial of human rights, based on the Charter of Rights and international conventions. Therefore, the Canadian government should compensate him and render an apology. So here's the ethical analysis. Duty to reparation, the duty to compensate others when we harm them, and that is what the Canadian government has done. Proportionality, penalty should be proportional to the harm. Omar Khadr was 15 years. He should have been dealt with proportionally as a 15-year-old, but he was not dealt with as such. Rationality, penalty as rational rebalancing into equality, not spasm of anger or emotion. He should have been dealt with rationally, not because of emotion. What are the characteristics of rights? Universal, everybody has them. Equal, everybody has them to same full degree. Inalienable, so I would like to emphasize on the word inalienable. He should have been dealt with based on his inalienable rights, cannot be taken away from him. Altruism, so altruism here simply means that Omar Khadr was compensated based upon altruistic reasons. However, it should have been done based on utilitarianism, and that is ethically recommendable if it brings the greatest good to the greatest number of people. That was why he was compensated with $10.5 million, because the Canadian government felt that this was a utilitarian activity which will benefit the whole of Canada and not just him, because his human rights were trampled upon. And when a single individual Canadian human rights is trampled upon, it means that the whole of Canadian human rights are trampled upon. So based on these ethical reasoning analysis, we submit that my colleague and I submit that his rights were trampled upon and the Canadian government acted unethically and illegally. However, now that they have compensated him, we think that the Canadian government has become full aware of its legitimate rights and have compensated him appropriately. Thank you. Thank you. These were bibliographies. These were our sources where we got our case from. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.